For a look now at some of the changes to America's public health policies under the Trump administration, we're joined by former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who sits on the board at Pfizer and is now the chairman of the board at Illumina. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
You know, Dr. Gottlieb, you worked in the first Trump administration. This second Trump administration seems very different in its approach to public health on a lot of fronts. One of them was really laid bare this week with this newly remade Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. Secretary Kennedy had dismissed about 17 members of the existing board and put in some members of his own choice. And in a video, the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics said federal immunization policy is, quote, no longer a credible process, and it's being politicized at the expense of children. That's a pretty stunning statement. Do you agree with the Academy of Pediatrics?
Well, look, you're right. I worked in the first Trump administration. I was fortunate to do that and proud to serve in that administration. I think we did a lot of important things on public health. We presided over the first cell and gene therapy approvals. The president tried to expand access to those treatments through the right to try legislation that he championed. He supported the FDA in an effort to try to keep tobacco products out of the hands of kids, record number of generic approvals, and a lot of other accomplishments. I think a lot of people on my side of the political aisle feel that a lot of these policies that Secretary Kennedy is championing are going to be contained to vaccines and not bleed into a broader public health doctrine. I think that's not right. I think there's a lot of people now who don't think these things are particularly political or shouldn't be, and don't think these decisions should be politically decided, who are going to find when they go to the doctor's office that vaccines that they may want to protect their lives or the lives of their families aren't going to be available. This does look like a political process right now. The secretary is going after issues that have long been bugaboos of him and his anti-vax group, Children's Health Defense. I don't think that's unmistakable at this point. I think that he would probably acknowledge that he's taking on issues that he's championed for the last 20 years to restrict access to certain vaccines. That's going to grow. The list is growing, and it's going to start to be very tangible for people and go well beyond just the COVID vaccine, which is, I think, what most people think about when they perceive this administration's or the secretary's efforts to try to restrict access to vaccines.
So one of the specific things from this meeting was advice to avoid flu vaccines containing an ingredient called a thimerosal. Right around the same time as the meeting, the CDC removed information from its website that debunked claims that this ingredient was linked to autism. Secretary Kennedy says it's journalists who are obscuring the truth. What do people need to know about the flu vaccine and this ingredient?
Yeah, so this is an old ingredient. It's a preservative used in multi-dose vials of flu vaccine primarily. Only a very small percentage of flu vaccine vials still contain it. What it is an ingredient that's added to multi-dose vials because those vials you're going to go in and out of with different needles as you administer the vaccine to different patients. So they're not single-dose injections, they're multi-dose vials. They're primarily used in some busy clinics, almost exclusively in adults right now. Back in the early 2000s, I was at FDA when we reformulated the vaccines. So we compelled manufacturers to reformulate the vaccines to take this preservative out, not because we thought it was unsafe, but because there was a lot of consternation among anti-vax groups that they thought that there was a link between this ingredient and autism. The ingredient does contain small amounts of ethyl mercury, not methyl mercury, ethyl mercury, which is the same kind of mercury found in fish, in very small amounts. And so we compelled the manufacturers to reformulate the vast majority of vaccines. Still 4% of flu vaccines that get administered mostly to adults are from these multi-dose vials. This has long been a bugaboo of the secretary and his group, the Children's Health Defense Fund. In fact, the only presentation at the ACIP meeting was from the head of that group. And you're right that there was a countering analysis from the CDC officials asserting that there's no link between thimerosal and autism. That analysis was taken down from the website. The secretary put out a statement that said that it didn't go through proper review.
We're going to take a break, Dr. Gottlieb, and talk more with you on the other side of this. These are complicated issues I want to dig into with you. So we hope all of you will stay with us. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We return to our conversation with former FDA Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. Dr. Gottlieb, just to pick back up, we were talking about the meeting that took place this past week with the newly reconstituted Advisory Committee on Immunization. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, you know him, he's a doctor, he has oversight and chairs the Health Committee. He called for the meeting to be canceled because he said there's no CDC director in place. And when it comes to these appointees, he said many of them do not have significant experience studying microbiology, epidemiology, or immunology, and they may have preconceived bias against mRNA vaccines. I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me that experience in immunology would be important if you're advising on immunizations. His counsel was ignored here. Is there any check on Secretary Kennedy at this point? Is there a need to get a CDC director in place quickly?
Yeah, well, the CDC director had a confirmation hearing this week, and hopefully she'll be in place soon. I think she's quite strong and a good pick for that job. The board, this ACIP board, isn't fully constituted. There's only 7 members on the board. At its peak membership, it has about 15. And you're right, a lot of the people who've been appointed don't have deep experience or any experience, quite frankly, in vaccine science. They are people who've been ideologically aligned with Secretary Kennedy in the past and worked with him, many of them, not all of them. And I think that isn't something that even the secretary would probably dispute at this time. And it did lead to some awkward moments at that meeting. For example, one member had to have explained to him the difference between an antibody prophylaxis and a vaccine. So there were evidence in that discussion where the CDC directors had to provide some, quite frankly, remedial assistance to help brief these members on the basis of vaccine science. So it did show, hopefully once they fully constitute that board, you're going to get more balance on it. I think some people are skeptical. I remain hopeful that there'll be some good members that get seated eventually.
One of the things about the American health system is that question of continued innovation. Earlier this month, the FDA approved a twice-yearly injection of an HIV prevention drug called lenacapavir. How significant is an innovation like that? And given the environment you're talking about, will these new advisors get in the way of being able to get those kind of things to market?
Yeah, this shouldn't come before ACIP. So this is a therapeutic. It's a long-acting antiviral that provides 6 months of protection against HIV and was extremely effective at preventing HIV infection in a population that was high risk of contracting HIV. So it's a change in the formulation of an antiviral that allows it to be administered just twice a year and provide sustained exposure to the benefits of that antiviral. We're seeing a lot of innovation like this. There was also news this week from a small biotech company that I don't have any involvement with, that they had developed a pill that could provide sustained protection against flu. So it's an antiviral, but it is formulated in a way where it could be administered once ahead of flu season to provide protection across the entire season and also look to be very effective. So we're seeing a lot of innovations like this. What I'm worried about is innovation in vaccine science. I work on the venture capital side where we make investments in new companies, and there has been a pullback of biotech startups that have been looking to develop new vaccines. For example, vaccines for Epstein-Barr virus, which we know is linked to certain B-cell lymphomas and maybe is linked to multiple sclerosis. That's a new area of science, the potential to vaccinate children against that, much like we vaccinate kids against HPV right now and prevent cervical cancer and other types of cancers. Maybe in the future we may be vaccinating for EBV, but there's been a lot of pullback to that kind of investment. So I think we're going to see less innovation in vaccine science as a result of the environment we're in.
Quickly, Secretary Kennedy was asked this week about the declarations in some states to start removing fluoride from water. Oklahoma made some moves that direction. He said you're going to see probably slightly more cavities, but there's a direct inverse correlation between the amount of fluoride in your water and your loss of IQ. What should parents be thinking about when they hear things like that?
Well, look, this has been a long-standing issue. Another issue that Secretary Kennedy has championed over his career, this perceived perception that there's a link between fluoride in water and some neurotoxic effects of that. That's been studied thoroughly. It's been, I think, fully debunked. There's very small amounts of fluoride in water, and at the levels that it's put into the water supply, it's been demonstrated to be safe. CDC has data showing that there's a 25% reduction in dental caries as a result of fluoride that's added routinely to the water supply. It's not just a question of increased dental cavities, but also oral health more generally, which we know is correlated to systemic health.
Dr. Gottlieb, good to get your insight today. We'll be right back. Even the Iranians concede that the damage to 3 of their nuclear sites from last week's bombing was excessive and serious, but it's a mystery as to what the Iranian nuclear capability is now. Friday, we spoke with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, Rafael Mariano Grossi, and we asked him just that.
It's clear that what happened, in particular in Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan, where Iran used to have and still has to some degree capabilities in terms of treatment, conversion, and enrichment of uranium have been destroyed to an important degree. Some is still standing. So there is, of course, an important setback in terms of those capabilities.
There was roughly 400 kilograms, which is just under 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium before the attacks. I know these are in small canisters and relatively easy to move. Do you have any idea where that was moved and if it was moved before the attack?
We presume, and I think it's logical to presume that when they announce that they are going to be taking protective measures, this could be part of it. But as I said, we don't know where this material could be, or if part of it could have been, under the attack during those 12 days. So some could have been destroyed as part of the attack, but some could have been moved. So there has to be, at some point, a clarification. If we don't get that clarification, this will continue to be hanging, over our heads as a potential problem. So this is why I say it's so important, first of all, for Iran to allow our inspectors to continue their indispensable work as soon as possible.
If we don't know where the highly enriched uranium is and cannot account for all the centrifuges, is there still a risk that they could be rushing towards a bomb?
We don't want to be alarmists here, and I don't want to be part of a messaging that would be spreading, as I say, alarm. But we need to be in a position to ascertain, to confirm what is there and where is it and what happened. Iran had a very vast, ambitious program, and part of it may still be there. And if not, there is also the self-evident truth that the knowledge is there. Yeah. The industrial capacity is there. Iran is a very sophisticated country in terms of nuclear technology, as is obvious. So you cannot disinvent this. You cannot undo the knowledge that you have or the capacities that you have. It's a huge country, isn't it? So I think this should be the incentive that we all must have to understand that military operations or not, you are not going to solve this in a definitive way militarily.
Up until these strikes, Iran was still disclosing information to the IAEA in certain amounts.
Well, there were deficits. There were some things that they were not clarifying to us, but our inspection work was constant. In particular, in this sensitive area of the number of centrifuges and the amount of material, we had perfect view. We didn't have view on other things that we wanted to have, but on this one, it was complete. It was comprehensive, and of course, at the moment, there is nothing.
Well, Iran wasn't keeping its stockpile of enriched uranium secret. What do you think it was intended for, and did you see anything that suggested they were looking to weaponize.
They have all these capabilities, but for the agency, first of all, they didn't have nuclear weapons. Okay? This needs to be said. The IAEA does not judge intentions. The IAEA looks at the activities of a country and reports it to the world. So it is countries that say, well, this is of concern or not. What we were concerning, what I was concerned about is that there were other things that were not clear. Mm-hmm. For example, we had found traces of uranium in some places in Iran, which were not the normal declared facilities. And we were asking for years, why did we find these traces of enriched uranium in place X, Y, or Z? And we were simply not getting credible answers. If there was material, where is this material? So there could be even more. We don't know. This is why we need to go back.
That report that you gave about some of these open questions or unanswered questions, the Iranians are pointing to it now, and the foreign minister seems to be sort of blaming you for the military strikes. He said it wasn't honest and fair, your report. What do you make of those criticisms?
The IAEA, as always, has had a very honest assessment of the situation. And there were many, I can assure you, there were many that were saying in your report, you must say that they have nuclear weapons or they are very close to have nuclear weapons. And we didn't. We simply didn't because this was not what we were seeing.
But you also said you couldn't verify that it was a peaceful program.
Absolutely, because we have to say everything.
People here are looking for clarity, and there's confusion in the United States. CBS is reporting that the Defense Intelligence Agency assesses Iran's program was set back a few months, but once they dig out, they could resume in a number of months. They have to rebuild electrical and water supplies. The CIA and the National Intelligence Directors say the facilities were destroyed and it would take years to rebuild. Israel says the military program is set back many years. What's the truth here? What do you make of these assessments?
All of that depends on your metrics, Margaret. If you tell me it will take them 2 months or 3 months, for what?
Right.
The capacities they have are there. They can have, in a matter of months, I would say, a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium, or less than that. But as I said, frankly speaking, one cannot claim that everything has disappeared and there is nothing there. It is clear that there has been severe damage, but it's not total damage, first of all. And secondly, Iran has the capacities there, industrial and technological capacities. So if they so wish, they will be able to start doing this again.
And you can watch our full interview with Director Grossi on our website and YouTube channel, or listen on our Face the Nation podcast platform. We'll be back in a moment. We turn now to Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, Amir-Saeid Iravani, who joins us from New York. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Thank you for having me.
Ambassador, can you give us some clarity? Does Iran intend to reconstitute a nuclear enrichment program on its soil?
You know that we are a responsible member of the NPT, and according to this treaty, we have the mutual rights. It means that the right of one side will be the obligation of the other side. Mm-hmm. In the NPT, it has been defined that we have two very explicit rights. The first is that we can have research and development, we can have the production of uranium, and we can have to use the peaceful energy. And the second right is that the legal protection by the IAEA for our activity and technical cooperation for our development program. Yes. And in return also, it will be two rights for the agency in this regard, that they should have the full access according to the comprehensive safeguard agreement. Yes. And the second one is that to preserve our peaceful nuclear activity will remain always in peaceful manner. So the enrichment is our right. And in unalienable right, and we want to implement this right.
So you do plan to restart enrichment, that sounds like.
I think that enrichment will not never stop.
Well, when you mention NPT, just for our listeners, you're talking about some of the international agreements Iran has made with the UN on non-proliferation and safeguards. You mentioned the UN nuclear inspectors. Secretary of State Marco Rubio released a statement yesterday saying that there were calls in Iran, this, I believe, is from a newspaper that the supreme leader oversees, accusing our prior guest, Rafael Grossi, of being an Israeli spy and calling for his arrest and execution. To be clear, is Iran threatening UN inspectors?
No, there is no any threat. It is a very clear law of our parliament that they have been suspended our cooperation with IAEA because the agency has not implemented their rights, their responsibility. Due to this, it is a conditional law. And as long as this condition has not been set, so our cooperation with IAEA will be suspended. But whenever it's set out as according to the law, so we can have resume our cooperation. But there is no any threat against the general director of the IAEA.
Well, that was published in Iran's Kayan newspaper. Your foreign minister did also say that the IAEA and Grossi himself are malign in intent. Are the IAEA personnel, are the inspectors already inside Iran safe? And can they go back to their work of inspecting your sites?
Exactly. They are in Iran, they are in the safe condition, but the activity has been suspended. They cannot have accesses to our site. But maybe it is individual opinion of the people that may criticize the IAEA or threat the general director. But we criticize IAEA. Our assessment is that they have not done their jobs, so they failed and they prepared and paved a grave for such aggression against us.
I imagine that you would condemn the calls for his execution?
Yeah.
President Trump
is not in our behavior.
Well, I know, and you're speaking to us from the UN. President Trump said Friday that Iranian officials want to meet with him personally, and he said that will be soon. Mr. Ambassador, is Tehran planning to drop this demand of indirect communication with the United States, and will you begin speaking with the Trump administration?
See, we were in the negotiation, but because we know that any dispute between Iran and United States or other part of the JCPOA cannot be resolved without the negotiation and using the peaceful means to resolve this dispute. So we are in the negotiation and we are ready for the negotiation. But after this aggression, it is not a proper condition for a new round of the negotiation. And there is no request for negotiation and meeting with the president.
Well, the United States is wanting to meet with Iran to talk. And while the supreme leader issued a statement saying Iran had dealt the U.S. a slap in the face, after that, President Trump said he had actually stopped Israel from going further and had stopped Israel from an attempt to kill your supreme leader. Why not take the offer of a diplomatic lifeline? Because he seems to be offering one.
It is a very gross violation of the international law that threatening the supreme leader of Islamic Republic of Iran or any head of a state, they have impunity from any attack. So we should understand that what is the principle and condition for any negotiation. Negotiation has its their principles, and it is a give and take process. So we should engage in the negotiation and discuss with each other. Maybe we reach to a conclusion or not. But the unconditional surrender is not negotiation. Right. It is dictating their policy toward us. If they are ready for negotiation, they will find us ready for that. But if they want to dictate us, it is impossible for any negotiation with them.
Mr. Ambassador, Thank you for your time today. We will be watching and waiting to see if there are any diplomatic opportunities. We'll be right back. Our Imitaz Tyab is in Iran and filed this reporter's notebook. We want to note the Iranian government is monitoring our CBS team's movements there.
We started our journey from the Turkish-Iranian border at night. A nearly 600-mile trip made longer by checkpoints and bad roads.
We've already been driving for 10 hours and have another 4 hours ahead of us.
When we reached Tehran, we found the city slowly coming back to life. With the ceasefire appearing to hold, some had started to venture out. And after days of silence, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei spoke in a taped address where he lashed out at Israel and the U.S., saying Iran had, quote, delivered a slap to America's face. Fatemeh Mohajerani is the Iranian government spokeswoman who told us President Trump's decision to bomb 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities was a mistake. What happened was a bullet to diplomacy, she said, but from the point of view of Iran, diplomacy has no end. At Friday prayers, the truest believers in the Islamic Republic.
Here in theocratic Iran, religion and politics don't just go hand in hand, they're inseparable from each other. And as expected, you can hear chants of death to America and death to Israel.
In the women's section, more anger.
What is your message to President Trump?
She said, hands off Iran, Trump. This is not your homeland. Our next stop was to a well-to-do neighborhood in Tehran, where the scars of war were clear to see. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of mourners gathered in Tehran for the state funerals of top military commanders, nuclear scientists, and women and children killed in Israeli attacks.
What's really been striking at this demonstration is, yes, there are many people here who are very supportive of the Iranian leadership, but we've met people from across the political spectrum who share in their anger and in their grief.
It's our Imitaz Tyab reporting from Tehran. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.